Hello my fellow working class heroes, good day. I am Carlo and welcome to Carlo Excels. These are the objectives of this episode. Today we're going to talk about the intermediate applications of the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions. Specifically, we're going to talk about the approximate match usage when it comes to the range lookup of VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. At the same time, we're going to talk about wildcards. So for my viewers, this is actually the second episode of the VLOOKUP series. If you haven't seen the first episode yet, which talks about the basics of the usage of the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions, please proceed to the lower part of this YouTube video, in other words, the descriptions, to find the link to our basic video on the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP function. Also, for this video, we are primarily going to look at the VLOOKUP function. So in other words, all of the examples that we're going to discuss is going to be using the VLOOKUP function. But please do not worry, because just like what I said during the previous video, the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP function exactly the same. They work exactly the same. So everything I discussed regarding the VLOOKUP function can also be applicable when using the HLOOKUP function. So right here, we're at my Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, and we see here this chart over here which shows grades and then certain ratings. So grade of 0 is horrible, grade of 10 is very bad, 20 is bad, all the way to 100, which is perfect. Say for example, what we want to do is we want to enter a grade here. Then we want Microsoft Excel to automatically give us back a rating based on this chart here. So we give the grade here, and Microsoft Excel gives us back the rating for that grade here. Now let's apply what we learned from the previous episode. So let's highlight this cell here to specify that we're going to input something here. So let's do a VLOOKUP. So calling upon the VLOOKUP function. First, we're looking for the lookup value. So the lookup value, this is what we're going to use as the lookup value, because this is where we're going to enter the data that we wish to look up. So we click this as a cell reference. This is the table array that we're going to use. And in this case, we need the second column of the table array, just like what we discussed in the previous episode. And then in this case, just like what we discussed in the previous episode, we're going to use the false range lookup to look for an exact match. And then we press enter. You will see here that the rating so far says horrible. Why does it say horrible? Because, well, the blank that it is looking for, in other words, the cell that it is looking at right now, is blank. So therefore, because it's blank, it has a value of 0. And you will see here, 0 has a rating of horrible. In fact, if you put a 0 here, it still says horrible. But if we now put a rating, a grade rather here, like 10, you will now see it says very bad, just like what it's supposed to say as per VLOOKUP. Then we have 90. It says very exceptional, and if we have a 100 here, now we have perfect. Now, just like what we talked about during the previous episode, the exact match works like this. When Microsoft Excel is given the instructions of the exact match, in other words, if you put false in the range lookup, Microsoft Excel is going to try to look for the exact value of the lookup value. It's going to find exactly 100. Now, if the value that you're looking for does not exist within the current cells, it is going to give back an error. So for example, if we write words here instead of numbers, now we see errors here. The problem now with this is, what if you want to give a grade that is somewhere in between these values here? They're not exactly 30 or 40 or 50, but somewhere in between. Say for example, you want to give a grade of 45 right here. Now, if you want to give a grade of 45 here, you will notice that on the chart to the left, there is no 45. So therefore, Microsoft Excel cannot find exactly 45, and therefore, you get value not applicable error because it cannot find 45. So in this case, this is where approximate match comes into play. So far, we've been using exact match, but now we're going to try to use approximate match. Approximate match happens when, in the formula of VLOOKUP, you see here in the formula of VLOOKUP, instead of using false as the VLOOKUP, as the range lookup rather, we use true. When you use true over here, you're asking Microsoft Excel to use VLOOKUP for an approximate match. And now, using the true value as the range lookup, let's try this formula. Let's press enter. Now you see that instead of having an error, you now see that the rating gives back a value of low. In other words, even if you put a grade between 40 and 50 in this case, Microsoft Excel now gives us a value of low. Now let's try doing this, for example, 55. Now we see that even if 55 is in between 50 and 60, it's not exactly 50 or 60, it's in between 50 and 60, Microsoft Excel now gives us a rating rather, of passable. Now, how exactly does the approximate match work? Now, when you use the approximate match and you ask Microsoft Excel to look up a particular value, the first thing that Microsoft Excel is going to try to do is, it's first going to try to look for an exact match. If it finds an exact match, no problem there. But if it cannot find an exact match, Microsoft Excel is going to approximate. Now, how does Microsoft Excel approximate? Microsoft Excel, just like what I wrote here on the screen, Microsoft Excel will use the greatest value that is less than the lookup value. Again, the greatest value that is less than the lookup value. So let's look at this. If we put in here a grade of 50, for example, just like what I stated a while ago, Microsoft Excel is going to start by looking for an exact match. And in this case, it did find an exact match, which is 50, and 50 is going to be passable. But if it cannot find an exact match, say for example, we put in here 59, you will notice, of course, that 59 is closer to 60 than it is 50. But just like what I mentioned a while ago, the rule for approximate match is it will use the greatest value that is less than the lookup value. So in this case, 50 rather is lesser than 59, and it is the greatest value that is less than 59. So therefore, Microsoft Excel is going to consider 50 as the correct lookup value, and it's going to give us back the passable rating. Now, my dear viewers, this part is very important. I hope you pay attention. Now, when you want to use the approximate match feature of the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions, please note that the approximate match feature does not work properly when the lookup values, or when the column which has the lookup values, in this case the first column, when it is not arranged in ascending order. In other words, the approximate match feature of the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP function will only work correctly if the column you are looking at is in ascending order, meaning lowest values listed first and then greater values listed later. So in other words, if we disarrange this, the approximate match feature is not going to work correctly. So please make sure you arrange the first column in ascending order. Now, for us teachers here in the Philippines, this is the most common usage of the approximate match function of the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions. So you commonly see it in the transmutation of grades. So when I look at class record templates that I find on YouTube or Google, this is where I see the VLOOKUP approximate match function frequently used. So what we have here on my screen right now is a very small chart which has the initial grades and transmuted grades as per DepEd Order 8 series of 2015. So we have here our initial grades from 0 all the way to 100, and then you have the corresponding transmuted grades from 60 all the way to 100. Now, just like what we mentioned during the previous part of this lesson, we make sure, if we're going to use the approximate match feature of the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions, we have to make sure that the column we're looking up at is arranged in ascending order. That is why the initial grades are already arranged from lower value to higher values. So let's try using the VLOOKUP function for this. So in the transmuted tab, so what we want to do, of course, is we want to enter some sort of initial grade here. And on the transmuted tab, we want the corresponding transmuted grade to appear. So if you've been following our lesson so far, this should be easy now. So we have here VLOOKUP. And of course, this is the lookup value that we're looking for. This is where we're going to enter the grade that we want to transmute. So this will be the lookup value. This, of course, will be the table array over here. And then column index number, we want column index number 2 because this is what we're going to look up, and this is what we're going to we want Microsoft Excel to return. So column index number 2, and then of course we want to use the approximate range lookup in this case, true, and then we press enter. So right now the transmuted grade is 60 because once again the cell for the initial grade is still blank, so blank means 0, so it gives us back the transmuted grade of 60. But the moment we put in something here, say for example the initial grade of 12.6, for example 12.6 is between 12 and 16, and therefore the transmuted grade for that is 63. So we have here an initial grade, for example, of 86.80. You have a transmuted grade of 91. Or for example, you have an initial grade of 95. You have a transmuted grade of 96. So this is the most common application of the VLOOKUP function when using the approximate match range lookup. Now, just a side note before I proceed, for those who wish to create templates or class records with automatic transmutation, please take note that this is not the easiest way for you to do automatic transmutation. There's actually a far simpler way to do this, and we had a previous Carlo Excels lesson on that. It's called, the DepEd transmutation formula. You will find a link to my video on the DepEd transmutation formula on the description parts of this video. Now we're at this screen. If you take a look at the screen, now we have here, of course, our fictional students. Of course, we have, as usual, we have 200 of these fictional names of students. And then you have here their fictional grade 7 grades from Filipino all the way to values. Now I'm going to demonstrate what we did during a previous lesson. So during the previous lesson, what we did was, whenever we enter the name of a student here, on the student part of, if you look at the blank here which says student, if we enter the name of the student here, we wanted Microsoft Excel to automatically display their Filipino, their English, Math, Science, Social Studies, TLE, MAPE, and Values grade here. So we can do that very easily using the VLOOKUP function, and we're gonna do that next. Now this is something that we already did during the previous lesson, so let's demonstrate that again. So let's call upon the VLOOKUP function like so. This is going to be the lookup value because this is where we're going to enter the name of the student. And then this is going to be the table array like so. And then because the Filipino subject is on the second column, this is the Filipino subject we're doing right now, second column. And then we want an exact match for this. So we're going to use false range lookup. Now because we intend to copy paste this formula downwards, let us put this. Let's turn this into an absolute reference. So was this and so was this. Press enter. So we copy this and then we paste it downward, and then we just change the column index number to reflect the respective subjects. So for English, column index number is 3 because it's the third column. For Math, column index number is 4 because it's in the fourth column. Science is 5. And then Social Studies is 6, TLE is 7, MAPE is 8, and Values is 9. Alright, let's see if the formulas work. So let's copy the name of a student here, and then let's paste it here on the blank for students. Yes, it works. Now we see here all of the grades for the student Abby is displayed here. Let's say, let's try Chance over here. Let's copy that in this blank here. And we have the grades of Chance over here. Yes, those are the grades of Chance over there. But what if you want Microsoft Excel to try searching for the name of the student even if you do not completely enter or completely input the name of the student? What if, for example, you just want to input the last name or the family name of the student and you want Microsoft Excel to more or less automatically search for the student and then display the grades accordingly? This is where wildcards come into play. Now, during our lesson on the COUNTIF function, we started using wildcards. That is the lesson where I introduced the concept. If you haven't watched the video on the COUNTIF function yet, I suggest you do so. The links are in the descriptions down below. Now, just like what we mentioned in a previous video, wildcards allow Microsoft Excel to be a bit more flexible when it comes to searches of values. So let's try this. We are going to enter the last name of a student here on this particular space, which is labeled as search. And then when you enter the correct last name for a student, Microsoft Excel is then going to display the full name of the student and then his or her corresponding grades. Now, this is what we want to do. First, let me remove the name of the student here, and then let's highlight this cell over here just to indicate that this is where we're going to input our data later. Now, let me zoom in so it's easier for you to see what I'm gonna do. Let's do a VLOOKUP function here, right? Now, we want to VLOOKUP whatever value we're going to place in cell L2. That is where we're expected to type in the last name of the student later. So VLOOKUP whatever's in cell L2, but instead of just, remaining it that way, what we're gonna do is we're gonna insert a wildcard. How do we insert a wildcard? We do an ampersand, if you remember our lesson on concatenating text, let's do an ampersand, and then let's put in the wildcard symbol separated, or rather surrounded by quotation marks. So the wildcard symbol once again is the asterisk. So quotation mark, asterisk, quotation mark. So this is how you do a wildcard VLOOKUP search. A lookup value with wildcards. Now let's finish the rest of this formula. So table array. The table array is of course this table right here. Over here. And then column index number, we want that space. We want this space here to give back the name of the student. And of course, the name of the student is in the first column. So column index number is going to be 1. And then we want an exact match in this case. So range lookup is false. And then we press enter. So you see here, the function is still not working correctly because we haven't yet entered any name here on the search bar, just like what we planned before. Now, if we try to enter a last name of a student, say for example, the student Abby over here, if you see here the first name, or rather the name of the first student is Abby. If we try to enter just the last name Abby over here, you will now see that Microsoft Excel, using the wildcard, Microsoft Excel is now recognizing Abby as a valid last name and has displayed the name of the student and the corresponding grades of this particular student. Let's try another name. Let's try this guy over here, Barros, or rather this is a girl. Now, let's try Barros, so Barros. And you have here the name of the student and the corresponding grades of that particular student. Please take note this particular quirk of the VLOOKUP function. The VLOOKUP function is going to always start from the top of the list and then it's going to go down. As for the HLOOKUP function, it starts from the left part of the list and then it will move to the right. What I want to say, I'm mentioning that because Microsoft Excel is only going to give you back, when it comes to wildcards, it is only going to give you back the first instance that it sees on the list. Say for example, these two people over here. You will notice that there are two people here who are named Brooke. These may probably be siblings, but both of them have the last name Brooke. That is why if I try to enter Brooke in the search bar over here, Brooke, it only gives me the first instance, the first on the list, Brooke, which is Donnie. So you will see here, Donnie is the first Brooke. That is why Donnie is what appears here. So if you want to have Jewel, Brooke, so you will have to add to the wildcard Brooke, comma, space, and then J, like so. If you press on that, it will now show Brooke Jewel. So that is how you use VLOOKUPs with wildcards. So just like what I've showed you so far in these two previous lessons regarding the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions, the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions are actually very versatile, and there are many more creative ways of using them. One other way of using them is using the VLOOKUP function to not only search using one condition, but rather using the VLOOKUP function for searching multiple conditions. For example, what if you want to specify both the name of the student and the particular subject that you are looking for? That is achievable with the VLOOKUP function using a few roundabouts, but the methods are not difficult to grasp. Those concepts, in other words, using the VLOOKUP function to search for multiple conditions, is going to be discussed in the next episode. So once again, please subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss that lesson when it comes. So that's it for our lesson on the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP functions using approximate matching and using wildcards. I hope I earned your subscription today. Once again, I am Carlo and this is Carlo Excels. Thank you very much for watching.